INEOS have just revealed a striking new foil. Those who've been following the America's Cup will notice it's radically different from anything we've seen from Emirates Team New Zealand or Magic or Luna Rossa in this cycle. However, those of you with longer memories will recall INEOS had a similar looking W or gullwing foil in AC36. At the time, I described that as the most advanced foil that we likely wouldn't see raced. Now, the gullwing has some unique advantages over other foil shapes, but also some difficulties. This new foil we've seen from INEOS actually has a lot of resemblance to the previous gullwing they used in AC36 in the testing, the foil that was initially launched on their B2 Britannia. There's a lot of features to this foil that we can recognise from that previous iteration, and we can see it as a natural design progression from the W foil that never saw racing action. And INEOS weren't the only team to develop a W foil in AC36. Luna Rossa did likewise, and likewise backed away from that concept before racing. But 3 prominent engineers have left Luna Rossa for INEOS. Perhaps there's now enough people with INEOS that think it's time to revisit this W foil concept, and together think they've got the answers to whatever the challenges were with the previous W foil system. So what are the features that we can recognise? Well, in the previous Cup, INEOS launched a few behind-the-scenes clip from within Brackley when Mercedes had just come on board. And actually the W foil was one of the first creations that we knew of to come directly out of Mercedes. What was interesting about those clips was we saw the test jig that INEOS were using. And within that test jig, there were the cross sections where we could make out the radiuses that the flaps were moving through. And it was clear that they had inner and outer flap segments which were using separate pivot points. Hinges which are actually outside the body of the foil for the inner segments, and hinges which are inside the flap for the outer segments. Now this was quite controversial for AC36, where you were only allowed 2 distinct flaps either side of the symmetry line, yet clearly INEOS had a foil here which had 4 flap segments split over the complete foil wing. Now, the rules have slightly changed for this America's Cup, and you're allowed 1 flap, however it can be made up of multiple segments joined by areas of flexure. This opens a door for the gullwing to come back, and its legality is pretty secure actually in the new rules. But it's still interesting, and it's actually quite a difficult mechanical engineering problem to solve to get these flaps to be articulated around these harsh corners in the foil. The press release that came out of the America's Cup site on the Recon report pointed to some fences which are visible on the foil, on the lower side of the foil. I don't think these fins are fences at all. In the last Cup, we knew, in fact, that they had similar structures on the underside of their foils which were external hinges. And we knew that from the behind-the-scenes clip at Brackley, where the cross-section, the jig that was holding in the foil, you could see the arc the flaps went to, which described a point, an external pivot point. Zooming in on the detail of the hinges which are on this new foil, I think they could be for a slightly different purpose. So there could be hinges within there, I'm not ruling that out, but if we zoom in we can see this segment at the back end of the fin that looks like it would move up within or move down within the rest of the fin. That suggests something is doing the work to move the flap from within that. And when we look head on we can see that these fins have a much greater thickness than the hinges which were used on the previous INEOS Cup foils. That all suggests they've moved the actuation system from inside the foil wing with an external hinge to having the actuation system outside the foil wing. That means less voids within the foil, less evacuation of air when it's put in the water, and we all know that those are some big issues that INEOS faced in the last Cup which maybe they've been looking to fix in this cycle. And the fact that they've got one of these external fins for each segment of the flap means they're probably looking to articulate these flaps completely separately with different actuators, which again is a step forward from seemingly what they were doing in the previous America's Cup. So what is particularly interesting is what INEOS have done around the junction between the foil arm, the vertical, and the foil wing lifting surfaces. So one of the unique things that Emirates Team New Zealand had in the last Cup was their lifting surface was separated aft of their vertical. This meant that the water, when it's got to move out around the vertical, it's not having to move out around the lifting surface at the same time. So you're separating that effort out that the water's having to do, and that reduces some of the cavitation risks and reduces basically high pressure points that you may get where you've got three kind of struts coming in, 3 foil sections coming into one point. INEOS have clearly done that. Their lifting surface is now aft of the vertical, and the way they've shaped their bulb is also leaning into this as well. Instead of a blended bulb out on the horizontal lifting surface, that bulb is kind of blended along the vertical axis, vertical symmetry line of the foil. So obviously a progression there as well. So what are the benefits of a gull wing or W foil over a T foil or Y foil? Well, you can kind of see it as bringing in some of the benefits from each of those two design philosophies. Now, a Y foil is good on the face of it because you still get the full span of the box, but your frontal area is less. Now, the actual lifting surface area going out on the Y is greater, but because you're meeting the vertical higher up within the box, you need less vertical strut. So any extra length you put on in the Y, you gain back and more on reduction of the vertical. This reduces your overall frontal area, so there's that benefit. Also, the angles where they intersect and join the vertical and the lifting surface are more equally distributed, again reducing some of the pressure hotspots. So all of those points are actually quite nice for a Y foil. However, a T foil is basically got an advantage of pushing the lifting surface as far away from the yacht's centre of mass as possible. That gives you extra righting moment. Whether that righting moment is a trade-off against the frontal area of the foil is very much up for debate, and that's one of the key areas that hydrodynamicists will be looking to answer. The other advantage of a T-foil is where the ends of the foil intersect the water. Because of the kink towards the end of the foil where it was potentially or most likely outcropping through the waves, if you can get that more upright, more vertical as it does that, you've got less foil area close to the surface of the water, so you're reducing the chance of large ventilations on that foil. The big downside though is you've got to somehow engineer the mechanics of how these flaps work around a radius, several big kinks in the foil. That means you've got to house actuators or linkages at least within these foils and around the corners. That takes up space, and that space leads to voids in the foil, and those voids when they flood with water and the air is evacuated can lead to problems, when the foil is initially dropped. We saw that as a big problem for INEOS in the last Cup, and maybe one of the reasons why the W foil was never released. So it'd be really interesting to see what they've done with the internals of these foils to address some of those problems. I think it's also worth pointing out that this week that American Magic have also launched a new test foil on their AC40. Looks super nice in a chrome finish. Very frustratingly for me, it's super difficult to see any features on a chrome surface. I'm sure that's not by accident that they've chose that finish. Is that all polished steel? Somehow I doubt it. I just feel like a lot of it should be composite. Now we see a lot of the actual flaps are steel, but I've always imagined, especially where it's blended into the foil arm, is a composite. So I imagine it's a chrome paint that's on that and not an actual polished steel surface. But I'll be waiting for when that surface degrades, because undoubtedly anything that you put in the water and sail around at 50 knots is going to degrade, and it'll be interesting how the shore team keep up with the maintenance of that. And as that surface wears down, I'm hoping to see more clues about how the flap configuration works on that foil. Right, that's it for me for today, but keep your eyes peeled this week, because we've also got the return of T. Rahutai. So as soon as she goes on the water, I'm going to be casting a keen eye over the above waterline systems they've got aboard and having a deep dive into that. So of course you can like or subscribe to this video. It doesn't help me particularly, but it does help these videos pop up for you in the future. So if you want to see more, especially with the developments which are happening at the moment, then make sure you do that. I'll catch you around. Got some exciting times ahead. Take care.